Hello, everyone. So this week we're going to be carrying on talking about Sun, Saturn. So that's transits of Saturn to signs, but we're going to be focusing on the so-called cardinal or movable signs. And the reason we're doing this is because even anyone who is doesn't know any astrology or only knows a smattering still knows their so-called sun sign. And if you know your sun sign, then if you know when Saturn is entering a sign, which can be easily found out, then you'll kind of like this will be of some relevance to you. So for somebody who's just beginning in astrology, this could be of some relevance. And if you haven't seen it, please have a look at our previous video on the Sun Saturn directions or Sun Saturn transits, which will explain a lot of the general features of Saturn going over the Sun or Sun transiting Saturn and what even that means and how often that happens and everything. Because in this video, we're just going to be getting in to the sort of Saturn going through the cardinal or movable signs. And now, Ollie, do you want to sort of explain a little bit about what cardinal or movable signs are?
Yeah, well, so cardinal signs are basically as I assume most people know, the 12 signs of zodiac are divided into the four elements of fire, earth, air, and water. And each of those four elements are subdivided into three principles, which are cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And so the cardinal signs are the first sort of uprushing the birth of that element, which then becomes fixed in the fixed signs, and then becomes unstable in the mutable signs. Is probably the best way of putting it before it
Yeah.
transforms into the next sign. Um, so looking at the cardinal signs, we would expect a speed and suddenness to them, um, to the element that is within them, which to some extent explains or gives them a magnification or insight into the nature of that sign. Do you want to put some more on that, Marcos?
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And I like you're talking about the sort of like the cardinal, the traditional. There are two traditional. The traditional label for the cardinal signs was the movable signs, which I think
Yes,
could be a little bit confusing because it sounds a bit too similar to mutable. So we'll stick with
indeed,
cardinal,
yes.
but the idea was that they were very quick moving. They were fast, as you were saying, Ollie. They're the beginning of a thing, and that they were called that because they're sort of like they're beginning the season. So really, these are the signs which in Western astrology follow the solstices and the equinoxes, the beginning of
Yeah.
spring, the beginning of summer, the beginning of autumn, the beginning of winter. So those are the four signs, and we've got one sign in each element, as you were saying. So um yeah, so I guess each of the signs has different features. So you've got the fire, the water, the air, and the earth, but all of them share in common because they're cardinal, they're quick, and they're rapidly changing. That's the symbolism of those signs, fast and rapidly changing. And of course, of the elements, you've got fire, air, earth, and water, with fire being the fastest, and then earth being the slowest and the densest. So your cardinal earth sign, Capricorn, is not going to be moving as fast as your cardinal fire sign, Aries, but
Yeah.
it's relatively faster than the other earth signs, certainly much faster than the fixed earth sign, Taurus, which moves not very fast at all. So that's the idea. So when Saturn goes into any of those signs, Saturn, as we explained last time, is the planet that slows things down and can be sort of obstructive, can be challenging. But what I find interesting about these four cardinal signs is that in two of the signs, Saturn is enormously powerful, and in two of the signs, Saturn is traditionally enormously debilitated.
Yes, yes.
So it is interesting, and it's interesting that at first glance, the signs in which you think Saturn would be powerful. One of them, it's like Capricorn. Okay, the Earth sign. Okay, you can see how Saturn, this planet that symbolizes all things slow and old and cold and bleak, might be happier in Capricorn, which is an Earth sign. That is, you can sort of get your head around that. But then Saturn being super strong in Libra, this other sign, that at first glance is very puzzling because Libra is an air sign, which is a movable air sign, and Saturn symbolizes things which are cold and old and slow. But I think there are lots of traditional reasons why it would have been exalted in that. One of them might be that because it's autumn and things are starting to die, and Saturn is the reaper, Saturn, the old reaper with his scythe. So there's that sort of more traditional side to it, perhaps. But there's also the sense that Saturn symbolizes things which are sort of logical in a very subtractive way. So it's kind of, I don't know, there's something about Libra, this air sign, which is on the face of it very sociable and kind and friendly, where Saturn is at its best in Libra, because it's almost like Libra brings out a lighter side of Saturn, which is not really possible. But what it means is that Saturn in Libra symbolizes things that are, I don't know, more fair in a way. So Saturn in Libra has a strong sense of justice. So I don't know. I think maybe the way to do this would be to talk about each of the four signs in turn and what that would look like when Saturn went over the native sun. So, and I'm just going to show before we get into that a little animation now, because I prepared it this time. I was a little bit more prepared. So I'm just going to share my screen. So what this is, all I'm showing is this is a very, 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 very simplified chart with just Saturn up here and the sun in it. And this is the very moment that Saturn enters the sign Aries, which it will be doing again on the 25th of May, 2025. And if you watch the last video that we did, you'll know that Saturn repeats a circuit of the zodiac approximately every 28 years, 29 years. So it takes 29 years to traverse. So this is when Saturn's going into Aries. So for anyone who is an Aries, at some point between the 25th of May 2025, and if I dial this forward 1 year, 2 years, and let's see a few more months, Saturn's going retrograde again. And then, okay, so between the 20th of May 2025 and looks like the beginning of April 2028. To be precise, that's going to be the 14th of April 2028.
Yeah.
So 3 years, not for a bit of that time, Saturn will dip back into Pisces and maybe, but between that 25th of April 2025 and 14th of April 2028, Saturn's going to be in Aries. So for anyone who has their sun in Aries, Saturn will be conjunct or conjoining the sun. But for anyone with the sun natally in Cancer, who is a Cancerian, or natally in Capricorn, sometime during that time, Saturn will be squaring their sun. And for anyone with the sun in Libra, sometime during that time, Saturn will be opposing the sun. So because Saturn enters a new set of signs approximately every 2.5 or 3 years, every 7 years, roughly, you will get, between every 7 and 8 years, roughly, you will get Saturn slightly beating up your sun, which will have some of the effects we talked about last time, like increasing melancholy and maybe making you a bit more sad and slow, or knocking your immune system a little bit and just giving you more inner and outer issues with authority, where you have to sort of overcome some tests or a sense of some trials or something. So that's going to be true for all of these four so-called cardinal signs, beginning from May next year, as we're recording this. That'll be in May 2025 up until April 2028. So that is kind of imminent. And I, as a sun in Aries, am wildly excited about the prospect of this. It's deep sarcasm. But anyway, um, so before we sort of start discussing what in Saturn in Aries might do to the sun in Aries, and or what it might look like. Any other thoughts, Ollie?
Um, well, just that I suppose we need to emphasize that you mentioned in passing, but for the timing, um, and I think I'm correct here, because we'll get these similar effects. So if your sun doesn't have to be in Aries for you because so it's not only people when the sun goes in Aries, as Marcos said, it's also the sign of it'll be if your sun is in Libra, you'll have the same effect, and if your sun is it's squaring as well, which is if the sun is in
Cancer or
Cancer
Capricorn.
or Capricorn. So that's four chances. If you're in any of those signs, what we're going to saying it can apply to you as well. So that's
Yes, absolutely.
a good
Yes.
chunk of the zodiac there. So
Yeah, it is. And what interests me about that, Ollie, is it just means roughly everybody's on a 7-year cycle.
exactly that's the logic behind that 7 year
Yes,
cycle
yes,
sort of
yeah.
thing.
Thank you, Ollie. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And I think we could get really, really into the weeds with this, but basically, Saturn, because Saturn has different likes or dislikes being in different signs. We mentioned a bit early that Saturn doesn't like being in Aries. It's in fall in Aries.
And that's yes, and for the same reason it likes being in Libra. Aries is the beginning of spring. It's the
Yes.
start. The days are getting longer. These are all
Yeah,
very
it's
un-Saturny
new life.
things.
It's the beginning of new
Yeah,
life. It's where the sun feels really strong. Saturn and the sun are kind of enemies traditionally, so
exactly.
Saturn
Yeah,
feels weak. Whereas in Libra, when the leaves are falling off the trees, it's starting to get colder. Saturn's about to come into his ascendancy, as it were, because winter is coming in the Game of Thrones line. So Saturn likes Libra.
exactly.
And similar logic, Saturn is in rulership in Capricorn, the sign at the very beginning of winter,
Yeah,
and Saturn is
midwinter.
in
Yeah,
detriment in Cancer, which
yeah,
is the beginning of summer.
exactly. Yes. So
Yeah. So the general topics that we talked about last time about Saturn going through a sign, if your sun is there, or in any of the other four signs, any of the other three signs, I should say, of the cardinals will apply. But I think if you let's deal with the suns in each of those signs,
okay,
perhaps.
okay. And then just think it might apply. Yeah, I think we'll deal definitely with the suns,
We'll deal
but
with the
with the
suns in
caveat.
each sign, and then I might just talk about how yeah, well, let's start with there. Let's start there.
Let's start with that. See how we go.
Yeah.
See how we go.
Okay, so shall I begin with Aries, and then do you want to
You
take?
begin with Aries, and then I'll do the next one. Yeah.
Cool,
Okay.
perfect. Okay, so Aries sun, normally a all else being equal, very strong sun. On a physical level, it can indicate, again, this very much depends on the rest of the chart, but in general, it's quite strong vitality, strong disease resistance. If anything, might tend to acute disease and will tend to react very strongly if it gets ill. Often more prone to sort of like an acute sort of febrile response.
Yes.
But with Saturn going into that sign, then some of that solar light may be dimmed temporarily. So there might just be, as with all Saturn Sun transits, a bit of a loss of vitality. But because Aries traditionally rules the head, and then there may be some sort of problems in literally in the head, like with the ears, particularly like ear problems, um, eye problems, particularly because the sun traditionally rules the eyes. Um, Headaches, migraines, anything to do with the very worst manifestations could be something like blockage, like strokes or blockages in the head, that kind of thing. Headaches, anything to do with sort of congestion in the head. So it could aggravate migraines and headaches, cause eye problems. Those are sort of possible physical manifestations. Obviously, that is not going to be true for everyone with a sun in Aries. What will be true is the stuff we discussed generically last time about the sort of tests and trials. I think what's interesting about this combination is because the sun is super strong and Saturn is debilitated, that the Aries person will, in general, really resent the passage of the Saturn through the sign. So it's going to be like, it's kind of the lessons will be possibly, I don't know if they'll be less instructive, but it's more like a temporary dimming of the life energy, which is felt to be less constructive, I would say. Whereas it's quite interesting if Saturn is passing through Libra across a Libra sun, and I've seen this in a few charts, the Libra sun person even sometimes notices an improvement in their quality of life, particularly if they're born during the day. It's like, oh, because it's almost like the Libra is like, will take those lessons of Saturn and go, oh, I'm going to upgrade myself. Whereas the Aries person in general will feel these lessons coming in and resist them and maybe even get more ill or more ground down or more to be, and that's, I think, partly because of the debility of Saturn in Aries, but it's also because of the fact that any planet in Aries really doesn't like Saturn, because it's in the sign of Saturn's fall. So,
Yes.
so this transit for a Libra person, Saturn going through Aries, will be challenging. But even though it's in opposition to Libra, which is a much more challenging aspect than a conjunction, it's actually going to be more challenging, I think, to Aries suns on the whole, because there's what's called a, this is getting into deep waters here for anybody who's new to astrology, but the sun in Libra is in Saturn's dignity, really likes Saturn, and Saturn, any planet in Aries, really likes the sun, so they're in mutual reception. So the Libra, so for this next couple of years when Saturn's going through Aries, your Ariesy people might feel a bit more frustrated and a bit more ground down and resentful, and therefore may get a few more health issues. Your Libra people might experience the same kind of tests, and inner challenges, but might, even though the outcome might not be so positive for your Librans this time because Saturn's so freaking debilitated in Aries, they might ultimately not be as irritated by them, potentially, as the Aries. But I mean, this is all very generic and independent of context, because really you need the
Exactly.
whole chart. Yeah.
You look at the whole chart, but it's one of the jigsaw pieces, and it can be an important one. So it's a good
Yes.
sort of starting point when you're looking at this. And no doubt in future podcasts we'll be talking about this sort of thing.
Yes, yeah. And just a similar point on that. I think the Saturn in Aries, to anyone who's a Capricorn, a Sun in Capricorn, rather like the Libras, they may find this a bit less irritating or a bit more potentially constructive, because again, the Sun in Capricorn likes Saturn, Saturn in Aries likes the Sun, but the Sun in Aries will reject it. And I think the ones who might experience it, interestingly, the worst, maybe even they'll dislike it even more than your Aries suns, will be a Sun in Cancer people.
Yeah,
I think they will dislike this transit of Saturn in Aries even more than your Arians will.
I agree, and that's because moving on to Cancer, it's a watery sign, and it's a sign where Cancer's not at all happy, and not Cancer, Saturn is not at all happy in it, so it's really quite debilitated as well. But Cancer people very different from Aries people. They're watery. They tend to be much more empathic. They tend to be more sluggish in their metabolism anyway. And so all things that Saturn makes considerably worse, especially mood-wise, could really see. But you could really see bouts of depression and things for people susceptible to that. Low energy things, and specific cancer areas, of course, which would be like the breasts for women, and I guess the breast for men as well. Also, the womb and other female
Body
gynecological
parts.
stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
and also, again, this is one of these great things. Some of the organs which it is disputed, but basically the chest area, the stuff that is protected by the shell is often a lot of that is often Saturn, like the digestive system, the stomach, and some of the
Yes.
other
I mean,
guts and things.
certainly, I think Do you not, are you familiar with Saunders's work on the sort of like what the planets in the signs represent organs wise?
Yeah, well, I couldn't bring it off to my heart. I have looked
Okay,
through it though, so I
okay,
know
because
it.
you know the principle here is that
Yes.
so Sun in Cancer, he would say, would represent the feet, which is really interesting because it's Saunders's system. It sounds completely bonkers when you first hear it, but anyone familiar with a bit of medical astrology will sort of see the logic of it, because the sun traditionally rules the sign of Leo, and in modern astrology as well. And so it's like Leo would be the sun's first sign, and then the 12th sign from Leo would be Cancer. So, because it's the 12th sign from Leo and we're looking at the sun, the 12th sign of the zodiac is Pisces, which rules the feet. So, the sun in Cancer is like Pisces, so it represents the feet. So, that actually does work a lot of the time.
Really?
So, weirdly, this transit of Saturn in Aries could bring Cancerians the stuff that you've mentioned, Ollie, like, depression, low mood, potentially chest or breathing problems, digestive problems, phlegmy, tired, that kind of thing. It could also give them problems with the feet in some cases.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
If
So
yeah, I mean, yes, any viewer, any listeners who are or viewers who
yeah.
are of a Cancer sun and find having feet problems after April,
Yeah.
give a comment.
Yes, please do. I mean, it's a bit of a random one, I grant you, but I mean, so the reason, I mean, you explain this, Ollie. The other reason I think the Cancer Sun may find this particular transit possibly a little bit more difficult. The two traditional astrological reasons. The first is that the Aries is the 10th sign from. Am I right? Is Aries the 10th sign from Cancer? It is, isn't it? It's the 10th house. So
Yes, it is.
yeah. So
Yes,
so
it is.
what that would be in traditional astrology is that would be an what's called an overcoming square. So what that means is if Cancer is on the ascendant, Aries is the 10th sign. So when Saturn is in Aries, it's literally in the boss position over the sun. So it's kind of like the weight is kind of heavier. And the second thing is that sun in Cancer, it's not terribly debilitated, but it's not very strong.
No,
So it's stronger than the sun in Libra, but it doesn't have that reception with like
no,
Saturn will reject anything in Aries. Saturn will reject anything in Cancer as well,
yeah.
because it's one of the signs of Saturn's detriment. So all that's not to scare you. It's just to say that in terms of the signs, which ones will field these transits better or worse? I think but these things will be very heavily modified by what's going on in people's individual birth charts and any other transits that are going on in the sky at the moment, and indeed the context of real life and a bunch of other astrological factors. So
But
we're talking
also, I
very
mean,
generically here.
use these as a guide. For instance, if you're going hiking in the period where Cancer is being afflicted by Saturn, make sure you look after your feet. Take extra blister passes. I mean,
Yes.
silly
Yeah.
thing. I mean, it sounds silly, but
No, it's
they're
actually a
avoidable. But
really.
these are warnings to you that there's going to be more dangerous stuff happening to your feet. It's not necessarily going to happen, particularly if you
No.
take measures.
Yes, exactly. And this whole thing we've talked about reception. So just moving on to the next sign, Libra, and I'll bung a little bit of Capricorn in here as well as a bonus. Those two signs, like you're saying, like taking your hiking example during the next couple of years, like say you've got a group of four people who all happen to be cardinal signs, like they're all like you've got one star sign Aries, one star sign Cancer, one star sign Libra, and one Capricorn, with your classic, newspaper star signs, who decide to organize, I don't know, a trip up Everest or something, and they're planning for it in the next couple of years. Well, that is a kind of cold ordeal, which would be very appropriate to a Saturn transit. And in fact, I have a friend of mine who has Saturn rising, and in their birth chart, they have a Sun, Moon, Saturn T-square, meaning they have Sun in a fire sign, Sagittarius, squaring Saturn rising in Virgo, and then Moon in Gemini. But the point here is they have a natal Sun Saturn square with a fiery sort of Sag Sun, which is an adventurer, and a Saturn rising in Virgo, which is so a bit more inhibitory. And when Saturn was, I think, Saturn was going through Sag, which I think was
Yeah,
that 2015 around then.
yeah, I think so. Yeah. Anyway, no one's going to mind, Marcos. It'll all be
Okay.
sorted.
So anyway, so Saturn in Sag sometime around then, they went on a sort of they paid to go on a husky sled thing across North America, which involved 3 months or so driving across this frozen wasteland on their own, looking after a team of dogs, which was just insane. I thought you're crazy, but they did it and they really proved themselves. But they also said they came back and they were bone cold most of the time, and it really nearly broke them. So that kind of ordeal. I mean, that's an extreme version. That's a very Sagittarius Sun way of doing it. But that kind of extreme thing can be something people are subjected to. The point here is that for those four different sun signs, your Sun in Aries and Sun in Cancer might on the whole have a more difficult time, more challenging time than perhaps Sun in Libra, and maybe certainly than the Sun in Capricorn. Your
Oh
Sun in
yeah, yeah.
Capricorn might find that the
You might love
Capricorn, the
it.
sign of the mountain goat, might do rather well
Yeah.
because the Sun and Saturn have a mutual reception. They have a square which is less challenging than the opposition to Libra, and the Sun in Capricorn isn't totally debilitated like it is in Libra. So anyway, just so in terms of Sun in Libra, how might the Saturn through Aries or Saturn going through any of those signs affect it? As I say, not so badly. There might be some of that melancholy, some of those. There may be some like issues with the lower back. Using Saunders' system, Libra is the third sign from Leo, which
Yeah.
could be equal to Gemini, the third sign of the zodiac. So there may be some problems with stiffness with the shoulders, arms, or hands, sort of lower neck, shoulders, this sort of bit. Particularly stiffness, coldness, age-related problems, tendinopathies. Those are very Saturn-related issues. And sort of the same kind of loss of vitality, like low circulation. But as I say, with Saturn and Sun in Libra doesn't mind Saturn so much. So there may be some fringe benefits at the end
Yeah.
of the transit. Okay, we've learned some valuable lessons here, type thing. And then finally, Sun in Capricorn. Over to you for this one, Ollie. And then
Okay, so Saturn is an Earth sign, so the slowest element. And classically Capricornians tend to be very practical people. And sort of doers rather than thinkers. And but it rules bones, sort of bones and skin, a lot of the Saturn signatures, because Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn.
mm,
But also classically, the knees is the absolute
yeah,
is a sort of the one we see in the zodiac sign. So again, I think there might probably be some fringe benefits as well, as you saw in Libra. It's an interesting one actually, because Saturn is very, very practical as well, which meshes very well with the sign. So you're going to definitely, it's not going to affect it as badly as the other signs. So definitely might be some really just sort of getting down and sort of it's not, there's going to be nothing fast about it, but it might be some like some slow work getting done. But areas to look out for are definitely the knees,
yes.
and to less extent anything to involving the bones, possibly the skin. Now, if we go around, hang on, you do the count for Saunders.
Okay, so that would be, I think, Leo is the first sign. So Capricorn would be the sixth sign, wouldn't it? So I think that's going to be equivalent
Fine,
to
yes.
Virgo.
So we'd be doing the digestion again. So it'd be classically the gut sort of thing. So
Mm,
especially slowing down of the guts, constipation, stuff like that.
mm.
Any transit issues and
And
things.
maybe gallstones as well, stone
Gallstones, because
formation or
concentration of
blockages.
stuff. Yes. So that
Yeah.
would be a classic, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Sort of obstruction is a Saturn
Yeah.
signature, isn't it? So but in general, I think this it's an interesting one for Capricorns. Just thinking about it, when Saturn goes through any of these signs, Sun in Aries won't like Saturn, whatever sign it's in. Um, uh, Sun in Cancer won't like Saturn, whatever sign it's in. Um, for most of them, Saturn is going to be best when it's transiting through Libra.
Yes.
So, because
Yeah,
Saturn is exalted in Libra, so it's going to be better behaved.
indeed.
Um, but I actually think for an Aries sun, the Saturn in Aries is going to be preferable to Saturn going through Libra because the sun has some power over Saturn when it is in Aries.
Right. Yes, it does. And
And
so
I
it
know from my own experience this is true. When Saturn went through Libra, I freaking hated it. I hated every minute of it, even though it's the exalted Saturn, because it was just like, whereas when Saturn went through Aries last time, I remember I got a lot of minor annoying illnesses like earaches. And there we go. Saturn in Aries, ruling the head, yada yada. A couple of coughs because Saturn is the Aries is the fourth sign from Capricorn and the third sign from Aquarius. So the fourth sign could be like Cancer, which is the chest and stomach,
yeah.
and so a few coughs and earaches and whatever. Mind you, I was partying a lot, so this was the Saturn coming and shutting my. I was 19 at the time or whatever, so this was
Right.
Saturn coming down, telling me to shut up and slow down and stop it. So, but it was less arduous than Saturn going through Libra. I think on balance.
Right, which would have been in direct opposition to your Aries
Yes, and
sun,
and the
very
sun will just
exalted.
they will that's called a mutual rejection or a war between equals. When you've got two strong planets who just don't get on, who are in opposition, they're not going to agree and they're going to duke it out really. So that's more tricky. Your sun in Cancer, as I say, won't like any of them, and it'll probably like similarly to Aries in this case. Weirdly, it's probably not going to like this Saturn in Libra because again there's a mutual rejection there
There
because
is, yes,
yeah
yes.
because cancer doesn't Saturn doesn't like being in Cancer and the sun doesn't like being in Libra, so your sun in Cancers will do least badly, perhaps weirdly, with this Saturn in Aries, even though this Saturn in
Yeah,
Aries is not
yeah,
good for the Sun in Cancer at all. But so I'd say Saturn in Aries, probably the one that will do the best is Sun in Capricorn, second best Sun in Libra, third best Sun in Aries, fourth best in this case Sun in Cancer.
yeah.
Sun in Cancer will probably prefer this though even to having Saturn in Libra. Um, Libras, as I say, they'll like that. Saturn in Aries, they're okay with. Saturn in Cancer, they're okay with, but a bit less so maybe because there's no mutual reception. Saturn in Libra, they'll frankly maybe not enjoy because Saturn is never a joyful process. A Saturn transit over the sun is still going to bring some of that
Yeah,
depression. As I
yeah,
say,
for
I've
sure.
seen it a few times, particularly for those people who are born during the daytime, because that makes Saturn warms him up a little bit.
Right.
They seem to get more out of that Saturn transiting through Libra. They end up often leveling up a bit, and I don't think they'll mind as much Saturn going through Capricorn. And then your Capricorns will probably Capricorn Sun might get the most out of this Saturn transit through Aries because there's a good mutual reception. Um, they won't enjoy quite so much the Saturn transit through Cancer, and they will detest the Saturn transit through Libra because there's a rejection there because the Sun doesn't like Libra. So
Yes.
so yes. So anyway, right, that's a bit of a whistle stop, but we've talked a bit about the how they may look. Again, if you haven't seen our last video on Sun, Saturn
Yeah,
in
very
general, please
important.
go and watch that because we covered all of the meanings of these transits and a few remedies and ideas what to do with them. So do go and watch that for context. And if you have enjoyed this, please like it, please share it, please subscribe, and we'll come back with another one.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Right.
Look forward to
Thanks.
seeing you all. Bye, Marcos.
Bye. Bye. Bye.